Welcome to Worldie. I'm Brandon Ward, and I'm one of the co-founders of Worldie, a footwear startup built for young athletes and their parents. So, Aaron and I decided to launch this podcast for a number of reasons that we kind of get into later on in this episode. But the main reason is to keep you engaged and connected with us as we embark on this startup journey. The typical format for our podcast going forward will be to provide some sort of context at the beginning as to who we are talking to and what we're talking about on that particular episode before kind of jumping into the conversation. Throughout the conversation, we'll provide a bit of narration to keep you clued in to what's kind of going on. The idea here is to highlight issues, milestones, or moments of enlightenment and give you a chance to experience it all with us. This particular episode will just kind of set the stage for subsequent episodes and begins with Aaron giving you a background on the idea that sparked Worldy and how he and I met. Well, without further ado, let's get started.
First idea came probably about 5 years ago at this point. So I played sports pretty competitively when I was younger. I started when I was like 4 or 5 and ended up playing a sport in college. And soccer and hockey were my two sports. Soccer, I was a bit more kind of like serious about and competitive with. And so I remember when I was younger, especially like in my teenage years, cleats were really the thing that we cared a lot about because we felt like you need something that's really high performance to perform the best on the field. And then also that's the way you kind of like express yourself. So you want to get cleats that are top of the line in terms of performance, and then also look flashy, kind of like their status symbol, all these kinds of things. So when I was younger and playing competitively, I found the process of researching cleats, going into stores, trying on different cleats, going on websites or social media, learning about different cleats, talking to friends, seeing what they liked, what they didn't like. That was a process that I enjoyed. And it was super easy for me when I go into a store when I actually needed cleats to find something that worked for me. And then I remember when I went off to college, I stopped playing soccer competitively. And I still was using the same cleats I had from high school. And then when I, like right after I graduated from college, I ended up playing in this kind of like rec league with some coworkers, and my cleats had fallen apart. So I needed a new pair. And then I went to this soccer specialty store in Chicago, and I remember looking at the shelf and there were all these different options. And because I hadn't done research in years, I didn't really know what anything was. It was all kind of like super expensive. It was like $250 for what seemed like high quality cleats. The lower quality cleats that were cheaper, the quality was terrible, and I really didn't want to use those. So I found it really hard to find something that was affordable, high performance, and didn't have all these kind of like ups and extras, bells and whistles, technologies that I didn't really understand or care about. And I remember also when I was in the store, I was asking for help from the person who worked there, and they knew even less than I knew. So that experience was just pretty painful. And that's when I first came up with this idea for some kind of soccer cleat soccer cleat or just cleat for former competitive athletes who want something that's, like I said, affordable, high performance, but doesn't necessarily have all these ups and extras that you don't want to pay for. So I thought potentially if you do a direct to consumer cleat where there's no athlete endorsements, you keep it consistent year to year, and you only sell maybe like one or two products, then maybe you could be a good idea, because just as you get older, what you're looking for in a cleat changes. So I had that idea for a while, didn't end up pursuing it until I came back to school. And I remember in our second year, so the first year is all law school. Second year, that's when we started in business school. And I remember there's this program through the Entrepreneurial Center at U Chicago. It's called the Customer Discovery Boot Camp, where essentially you come in with an idea and then you just test it with customers, you run surveys, you talk to people, and just see if there's anything there. So I saw that and I thought it was a good idea to just start testing this soccer cleat idea, seeing if there's anything there. And they encouraged you to come in with the team. So I asked a bunch of people if they were potentially interested in doing the boot camp with me. And I remember, like, me and Brandon, we met at, for the most part, at flag football. Is that right? Or did we know each other before then?
I think it was flag football. Actually, you know what? It was like the first day at booth, like booth orientation. Ran across you in the hallway because I'd seen you before on Zoom in one of my classes
Yeah.
in 1L. So that's
Yeah.
the first time.
Yeah. No, I remember that. And I remember I saw you during 1L2, and I saw that you had golf clubs in the background. So I was like, yeah, we'll probably get along with this guy. So we didn't really know each other that well when I talked to Brandon about potentially doing the boot camp, and then he was interested in it because he's also interested in entrepreneurship, also interested in sports and sports products. So, and he was a competitive athlete as well. So it just made sense for us to just team up and see if there's anything there. So we went through this program, talked to a bunch of people, a bunch of former competitive athletes, um, ran some surveys, and we felt like there was something there, but just the market is somewhat small, and people in that segment, they don't necessarily turn over their shoes or their cleats very often, maybe every like 4 or 5 years. And we also found that those people are super brand loyal. So if you've been wearing Nike for 20, 25 years, it's going to be really hard to get you to switch in your late 20s, in your early 30s, whatever it is. So we had a couple people along the way mention, there's this idea makes sense, but it might make more sense if you target kids. And when we first heard that, we didn't think it made sense to pivot right away, but we heard it enough times, and we started hearing these things about um, these things that indicated that potentially the former competitive athlete segment didn't make a ton of sense. So after, I don't know, a few months, 3, 4, 5 months or whatever of testing out this idea with former competitive athletes, we decided to switch to the kids market and focusing on a soccer cleat, some of those same things. So affordable, pretty high performance, comfortable, sustainable, all these things. So then we went through that same process of talking to a bunch of parents, running surveys, going to soccer practices, talking to people, observing behavior, seeing if there is anything there with that idea. And the main thing that we found is that a lot of parents, when their kids are first getting into sports, so when they're around like 4 to 10, they're not really buying sports specific footwear for every single sport or activity that their kid is playing or engaged in. So they're not going to buy a soccer cleat, a football cleat, a lacrosse cleat, baseball cleat, basketball shoe. Really, what they're doing is they're buying probably a running shoe, a basketball shoe, or a non-athletic sneaker, and they're sending their kid to all these different sports in the same shoe. And I mean, the vast majority are using a running shoe. So a running shoe, it doesn't really work. It works okay, but it's not the best when you're playing a sport on grass, on turf, things like that. So we came up with this idea of a shoe that could be used across multiple surfaces and multiple sports, because that's already kind of the behavior that parents already want one shoe for all these different activities. So we came up with this idea to build a shoe that is essentially meeting parents where they're at and allows kids to play, comfortably, and gives them high performance across different surfaces like grass, turf, hardwood, things like that. So that's where the idea currently is. And just in terms of progress we've made to date, we're working with a former Reebok designer. We've been working with him since probably like August or September, and he's been able to finalize the design, the initial design for us. And then we brought on a developer who worked at Adidas for a while. And essentially, the designer gets the design, a 2D or 3D design on paper. And then the developer is the person who actually makes sure that you can take that design and turn it into a working shoe. So um, currently, we're in the prototyping process. Our designer, our developer, and then some of our factory connections are working on creating a prototype, and hopefully we're going to have some kind of shoe in our hands in the next 4 to 6 weeks. And then from there, it's just testing, iterating, with the idea of a full launch in pretty much the next 12 months. The goal is to fully launch the brand by Q1 2024. So that's just background on the idea and progress to date. And anything that I missed or that you would add?
No, I think that was really comprehensive, and that kind of like set the stage as to like who we are. And I guess the next thing that we would really want to kind of get into is why this podcast? Why are we doing this podcast? Why are we giving you this information? And I think the reason we're doing this is threefold. And Aaron, definitely jump in after I make these 3 points as to why I believe this podcast is something that makes sense for us at this point. The first one, I believe, is it's an opportunity to kind of get our brand out there. So it's an exposure element, something that we can use to kind of create some awareness as to what we're doing, what we're trying to accomplish. And then that kind of segues into the next reason, which is to get you involved in the process. So we want to use this tool not only as a way to just to inform, but to get some engagement. So as a networking tool, as you kind of follow along with us and kind of sit in the back seat of this ride that we're on, you'll get a glimpse as to like who we're networking with, who we're working alongside, who we're partnering with, and then where our project is. Like, where in the product design process are we? Where in the production or prototyping process are we? And just get a feel for what it means to be like a startup in the footwear industry. Maybe that gives you a bit of insight as to like, okay, I'm interested in entrepreneurship, interested in footwear design, and this gives you a chance to kind of see what that process looks like from the early stages, like real time. You'll get a chance to see some of our struggles, some of our successes, hear those type of conversations, hear our conversations with just various people throughout the industry, and various people throughout our networks. And then the final thing, I guess, kind of ties into both of those, is just to be able to keep a lot of the people who are stakeholders or potential stakeholders in the loop. So we were sending out, or we have been sending out a newsletter, and so this would be serving as maybe an audio, or if we put this on YouTube, I guess visual newsletter, a chance to kind of just interact with us, a lot of the people that we've gone to school with, some people that we try to keep in contact with. There's so many people on our list that it takes so much time to be able to like communicate with each and every single one of them. This is just a chance to kind of communicate with them all at one point, in their own spots, like in their own place, so they can listen to this wherever they're at, and just get an idea as to like, okay, well, this is where Aaron and Brandan and Worldie are at, and kind of follow along and keep the interest there. So, Aaron, just jump in with any other kind of reasons as to why. But I thought those were like 3 big reasons why we would launch this podcast.
No, I agree with all that. And the only thing I would add, and this is probably just adding detail to what you've already said, but so I've started posting on LinkedIn about Worldie, about the process of founding a company. I started in maybe late January, and I've been posting every day since then, and have gotten a lot of people reaching out to me and wanting to know more about the business, where we're at, all these kinds of things. And then I've also had people say that it's fun to follow along with someone who's at the beginning of the process, because a lot of the content out there is backwards looking from people who have already built something, already built like a successful brand or company. So that's part of the reason too. We feel like there's a bit of a gap in terms of understanding really what it takes to start a business and what it looks like in the early stages. So that's just another reason why we think it makes sense to start this podcast.
Yeah. So now look forward to being able to throw out some future episodes and keep you engaged, keep you in the loop with what's happening. And like I mentioned earlier, You'll have an opportunity to see maybe some real time mess up, see where we've like coursed incorrectly, and then hopefully we'll correct course on some things, and just gives you a chance to just see a startup at its very earliest stage, from the idea, which Aaron really just outlined, to when the product is being produced, and hopefully we'll have some subsequent podcasts that talks about the timeline, but hopefully sometime early in 2024.